This is something that happened when I was a kid. I think that I was about 10 years old. Well, during this time, I lived in a house with my parents and older sister. I had my own bedroom, and one night, I woke up due to a very loud thunderstorm. I remember that it was almost 2 o'clock in the morning. There was loud thunder happening outside, and when I woke up, I was wide awake. I tried to fall back asleep for a minute, but I couldn't. So I remember that at that point, I got out of my bed, and I looked out the window into the backyard. I could see that it was raining very heavy, and there was a lot of lightning as well. I decided to play on my PlayStation in my bedroom until I either got sleepy again or the storm stopped. I always had a hard time sleeping with loud noises, so I was hoping that the storm would calm down very soon. I sat down in my gaming chair and started to play. For the next 10 minutes or so, that's what I did. At one point, I randomly turned around to look out the window though, and when I did, I saw what appeared to be a person moving away from the window really quickly. I didn't get a good look at all. My heart started racing though, and I didn't know why anybody would be at the window. I got up and walked over to it and looked out into the backyard. I couldn't really see anything. It was mostly just dark and raining. I went back over to my gaming chair and sat back down. Now I was really wide awake. I still didn't want to wake my parents or anything though, but I didn't know how to explain seeing a person at my window. I hoped to distract myself by just playing more video games. I remember that I kept telling myself not to turn around and look to the window again. The window was directly behind me. I played on my PlayStation for maybe 20 or 30 more minutes. Then I just decided to look behind me, and when I did, I saw that there was a person standing at the window again. Once more, they moved away, but it was slightly longer than the previous time. It appeared to be a man, and he was looking right inside at me. This time, I got up and ran out of my room to my parents down the hallway. I woke them up and told them that there was a man at my window. They got up and checked outside, as well as calling the police, but the man was not there anymore, and the police didn't find anything. It took me a long time to fall back asleep, but eventually I did. I covered my window, and I kept it covered for weeks. Luckily, that man never came back that I'm aware of. To this day, I still wonder who he was. I live by myself in a house a little ways outside of the city. This happened a couple of years ago. One day, I got home from work a little bit later at night. It was some time past 10 o'clock, and I was really tired. After getting inside of the house, I pretty much started getting ready for bed right away. I remember that I was in the bathroom across from the hallway from my bedroom when I heard a door downstairs closing. Instantly, I was creeped out when I heard it. I froze and listened to hear anything else, but there was just silence. After that, I left the bathroom and went back downstairs to see what it was. When I got downstairs though, I saw nothing. I noticed that I had left a window partly open and figured that the wind had blown the door shut. This is something that happens from time to time. I felt much better, and then I went over and shut the window and then headed back upstairs. Then I finished getting ready for bed and went into my bedroom. When all the lights were out and I closed my eyes to go to sleep, I heard another noise though. I thought it sounded like somebody walking around downstairs. At first, I told myself that I was being paranoid because of what I had heard earlier. I mean, it was hard to hear something downstairs clearly. It seemed like the noise really could have been anything because it was so far away and I could just barely hear it. Still, it was something, and it continued. I continued listening, and I realized that the sounds were actually getting louder. And then I realized that it sounded like somebody was coming up the stairs. That's when I realized that there was definitely somebody in my house. I started to panic, and I immediately got up out of bed and ran to my bedroom door. I closed it and then locked it. Then I went back over to the opposite side of my room and got my cell phone. I had no idea how, but somebody was inside of my house. As I scrambled to dial 911, I heard the footsteps approaching down the hallway. At that point, I froze. I was unable to speak because I didn't want this person inside the house to hear me. The 911 operator answered the phone, but I didn't say anything. I then heard the person inside of my house reach right outside my door, and then they tried the handle. The door didn't open because of it being locked, and after that the person turned and walked back in the opposite direction. After the footsteps went away, I'm not sure where they went. I was finally able to speak and told the 911 operator what was going on. I stayed in my room with the door locked, and I also stayed on the line with 911. They were really quick to respond, and within probably 3 or 4 minutes, police were at my house. During the time waiting, I didn't really notice hearing any other noises though, and when the police got there and did a thorough search of my house and yard, nobody was found. The door was unlocked though, which I'm 99% sure was not when I went up to bed. So I never found out who broke into my house. I also don't know how or when they got in. I'm guessing it was when I was at work, probably earlier in the night, maybe shortly before I arrived home. That's what makes the most sense in my opinion. My only guess as to how they got in was possibly the window that I had left open a little. It's ironic that seeing the open window made me feel better thinking the wind had blown the door shut, when possibly the intruder entered my house through that very window. Since then though, there have been no problems like it. I'm hoping that it stays that way. This happened a couple of years ago. My best friend Jessica had recently moved into a new apartment. She invited me over to see it, and I was very excited for her. The previous place she lived in was an old dumpy house with a roommate that she did not get along with. This apartment was a much better situation for her. So I remember that night I worked sort of late. I had told Jessica that I would come over after work. It was probably like 8 p.m. and dark out. Jessica had gave me her address, which I put in my phone to get directions. Her place was in an area that I didn't go to that much, but it was only about 10 minutes away. After leaving work, I started to drive there, but just minutes in, my phone died. It was at that point that I realized I did not have a phone charger with me. I kept driving and was about 70% sure that I could get to her apartment on my own. I was trying to remember the route, but I was a little bit mixed up. I ended up turning either too late or too soon, I'm not even sure, but I was going on a highway, and I knew that there was an exit and then just a couple more turns before her place. So when I took the wrong exit, my next turn was also wrong, of course. After about 10 minutes of driving around there, I realized that I messed up and I went back. I took a few more roads and then realized that I was completely lost. Before making things worse, I decided to try to find a gas station or something. I drove around for a couple more minutes until I found one. Then I pulled in and parked. It was quiet, I remember, and my plan was to walk in and get directions. When I made it inside, I went to the clerk at the front counter. I started to ask him if he knew directions, and then mentioned the name of Jessica's apartment complex. He said that he wasn't sure, but just after that, another man walked over and approached me. This guy was a little bit taller than me, was bald, and had a slight beard. He asked me if I was trying to go to the apartment complex that I mentioned, and said that he knew exactly where it was. I said yes, and told him how my phone had died and I was trying to go there. The guy said that he would help me out. He grabbed some flyer that was in the gas station, and then wrote directions for me on the back of it. He wrote the directions starting at the gas station that we were currently at, and then gave them to me. I told him thanks, and then I walked out of the gas station and went back to my car. Now I was on my way again, and only about 10 to 15 minutes later than I would have been. When I got to Jessica's, I would be able to charge my phone. So I started driving, following the directions that the man had wrote for me. I don't remember exactly every turn, but I thought that it would just take me about 5 minutes. I mean, I knew that I was in the general area, but I was just confused on the exact streets. After like 10 minutes, I started to question things a little. The directions had taken me seemingly farther out into the country. For most of the drive to that point, there were businesses around or other apartment buildings. But now, I was driving on a road surrounded by just woods on both sides. There were just a couple more turns though, so I decided to follow the directions through. I made it to the next turn, which surprisingly went onto a dirt road. Then I made the final turn. When I did, I knew it was wrong. It led me to this driveway of a random house. It certainly was not an apartment complex. There was no apartment building in sight. I stopped at the end of the driveway and was wondering what was going on. I looked at the directions again, trying to figure out if I had read them correctly or if I had gone wrong. Just then, as I was reading them over, this car suddenly appeared behind me. The car parallel parked on the side of the road, but completely blocking the driveway that I was in. I thought that maybe it was the homeowner and realized how bad of timing this was. But then the driver's door opened. I saw a man get out and quickly realized that it was the same guy who gave me directions at the gas station. He started walking over to the passenger side of my car and was walking really fast. I put my car into reverse and quickly started backing up. When I did, I went onto the grass to go around his car. Luckily, I didn't get stuck and I made it around the car. The man ran back to his car, but when I made it into the street, I put my car in forward and drove away. I went down that street as fast as I could and luckily was not followed. I went to the next gas station that I saw and went inside. This time, I finally realized that I should buy a phone charger instead of asking for directions. I really wish that I would have thought of that the first time. I was able to make it to Jessica's apartment not long after. I told her the story and we called the police and reported it. I believe the man intentionally gave me those directions to lure me to that property. I'm guessing it was his house. He also seemed to follow me the way back, even though I hadn't noticed. It really gives me the creeps to think back to it. A few years back, I was FaceTiming my friend late at night. It was my best friend Matt, and we would FaceTime quite a bit. During this time, I lived in an apartment by myself. So we had been on call with each other for a few hours, just chopping it up. Then I got another FaceTime call from some random number. I didn't know who it was, and I told Matt about it. He said that I should answer the call and see who it was. I was pretty curious as well, so I ended the call with Matt and answered the FaceTime. When I did, I saw this man who I did not recognize. His eyes were really wide, like he was purposely opening them almost as big as he could, and he was also holding the phone super close to his face. It made him look just really weird and creepy in general. I asked who the guy was, and he responded by saying my name. I was confused and asked him how he knew me, but he basically just started threatening me at that point. He was talking in this weird, half-whispered voice and saying a bunch of nonsense, like he was saying that I needed to watch my back and that he was coming for me and that kind of stuff. It was hard to understand everything he was saying because he was talking weird and rambling on. He was also talking pretty quiet. Now I had no clue as to who he was and how he even knew me. I tried asking him a couple of times, but he never answered me. It was so strange that eventually I just hung up. Then I called Matt back and told him the crazy story of the guy. Of course, Matt thought that it was really funny and couldn't stop laughing. I was laughing too, but I didn't really find it as funny. I mean, some random creepy guy was threatening me as if he was a stalker or something. What if he really was? I didn't know how he knew my name, number, or any other information. As I was talking with Matt, he called again like 5 minutes later. I told Matt this, and I once again answered the guy's call. This time, it was more of the same, as he continued his rant. I tried to interrupt him, and asked him several times who he was and what he wanted. The man then just started staring right into the camera with extremely wide eyes. He stopped talking entirely and was just staring. This went on for an uncomfortable amount of time. Now I was asking him things, and he wasn't saying anything at all. At that point, I told him that I was blocking him, and I hung up. Then I actually did block his number. I called Matt again and told him about what had happened, and we continued to talk. The guy didn't bother me for the rest of the night. I was wondering if he would call back with another number or something, or show up at my apartment maybe, but luckily he didn't. And for like 2 weeks, nothing strange happened. I had basically forgotten about the entire thing. But randomly, like 2 weeks later, I got another FaceTime. I don't know why, but I answered it. I was at home, and it was sometime at night. It was the same guy doing basically the same thing. As soon as I saw him, I hung up the phone and I blocked this number as well. I really didn't know what to make of this. I figured that he would call back again with another number or something. But after that, I never got another call. I still wonder about it. Who was that guy? And how did he know all that information about me? I've thought about it over and over again, and I can't come up with a good answer. It still gives me the creeps to think about it. But I'm just glad that he hasn't bothered me since, and hopefully never will. Back when I got my first adult job after college, I moved into a smaller house with a roommate. The roommate was a girl that I went to high school with, and her and I were in the same grade. However, we weren't really friends. We both knew of each other, but didn't have the same friend groups. I didn't know much about her, but somehow, after college, we found ourselves living in the same city. We had been friends on Facebook or something, and because we both lived there and didn't know anybody else, we decided to try to become friends and live together. We were both female, the same age, and figured that it would work out. But I was wrong about that. At first, she seemed cool. I honestly forgot where she worked, but she had pretty normal hours like I did. Our bedrooms were the only two in the house, and next to each other in the hallway. We were not best buddies or anything, but we got along good at first. But she seemed to have sort of strange behavior. I remember that I was noticing her leaving and coming home at all kinds of odd hours. All the time, I would wake up to hearing her leaving or coming home. I was a light sleeper, and the times would be anywhere from midnight to 5 a.m. I had no idea where she would be going or why. And this happened so much, at least several times a week. One time, I brought it up, asking why she was leaving at 2 a.m. She flat out denied it and said that I must have heard the neighbor. I didn't tell her I knew it was her, because I realized that whatever it was, she didn't want me to know. I didn't really think too much of it for the most part, though. But one night, several months into living there, I was out late. I was with some other friends, and I got back home at probably almost midnight. After arriving back to the house, I went inside and all of the lights were off. I turned on some lights and also noticed that my roommate's door was open and she did not appear to be inside. I called out her name, just wondering if she was home. I figured that she was gone again when she didn't answer. Then I went into my bedroom and changed and got in bed. I was tired, but after closing my eyes, for some reason, I had a hard time getting to sleep. I laid there for probably 20 minutes trying to rest, but it was like I wasn't tired anymore. Then, suddenly, I heard this noise inside of my room. I had no idea what it was. I looked up and saw my closet door opening. Then I saw my roommate walking out. It was really dark in there, but I could clearly tell that it was her. This was so strange. I had no idea what she was doing in there. I sat up and asked her what was going on. As soon as I spoke, she looked over and saw me. Then she started running and darted out of my room. I stayed where I was and was just so confused. Then, probably a minute later, I heard her leaving the house out the front door. At that point, I decided that I needed to move out of there as soon as possible. For the next couple of days, I packed up my stuff. I don't know where my roommate was during this time, but she was never there when I was. She must have only been back when I was at work. Then I moved out. After that, I haven't spoken to her since. She blocked me on social media, and I still don't know why she was hiding in the closet of my room. She probably didn't expect me to get home when I did. That's why her door was open and she was in my room. She must have had to hide in my closet and waited until she thought I was sleeping to try to leave the room. I'm glad that I couldn't sleep though, and that I noticed her. That was by far the creepiest roommate experience I've ever had. I live alone in a smaller house. I've lived here for 5 years now, and I would describe the neighborhood as average. By far the scariest thing to happen took place not too long after I first moved in. I'd been living here for maybe 6 months. One night, I was woken up out of nowhere to a loud banging at my front door. I remember being very confused at first, but once I came to my senses and realized what was going on, I looked at a clock. It was nearly 2 in the morning. I got up out of bed, and the loud pounding was still going on. I had absolutely no idea as to what this could possibly be. After leaving my bedroom and walking over to the front door, the banging suddenly stopped. Still, I went the rest of the way to the front door and I looked out of the window. When I did, I noticed that there was nobody there. I opened up the door and looked around. I saw nothing. Nobody in the street, nobody in my driveway or anything. It was very weird, because whoever had just been here seemed like they really wanted me to open the door. I stayed up for a little while after that, and nothing else happened, so soon I was able to go back to bed. I thought that maybe it was just a mistake or something, but I was still wondering about it all day the next day. Well, the very next night, something else happened. I was woken up in the middle of the night once again. This time, there was no knocking though. I remember hearing the sound of a car horn honking. It was coming from outside somewhere, but I couldn't tell exactly where. It sounded close by though. After it continued for a while, I got out of bed and once again headed to the front of my house. I was getting closer to the sound, and when I got there, I looked out of a window and I saw a car sitting in my driveway. I did not recognize it, but the horn was honking over and over. Obviously, with it being nighttime, I could not tell who was behind the wheel of it. I went to the front door and opened it up. When I did, the car suddenly stopped its honking and drove away really fast. I did not get a look at the license plate or anything. After the car drove away, I was once again left very confused. I figured this to be the same person who had been banging on my door the previous night, but why? I really didn't know. The car did not return that night, and once more, I went back to bed. The day after that, I was wondering if I would be woken up in the night again. I thought about going to the police, but ultimately, I didn't do it that day. So that night, I was not woken up. I thought things were back to normal. However, as I was leaving for work, I noticed a note taped to my front door. I picked it up and looked at it. It was handwritten, and it said, "I will be back next week." This really creeped me out. Somebody was messing with me for some reason. After that, I did go to the police. I showed them the note and reported everything. They said they would look into it, but said that it might just be a prank. I was really nervous the next week, but nothing happened. I'm glad that nothing happened, but also I'm confused. Since then, though, nothing strange has occurred. I'm not sure if it was just some kind of a sick joke or what, but I'm glad that nothing more ever came of it. I'm a female, and this happened when I was 19. At the job I had during that time, I used to work some really late nights. I no longer work there, but I do miss it sometimes because I think it was kind of fun. But I also did have one scary experience. It happened one Thursday night after a particularly late shift. I think that I got off at about midnight, and so I was driving back really late. The drive back home usually took about 15 minutes, and I lived with my parents at this time. Several minutes into the drive, I was sort of on a quiet road, and my car just started smoking. I didn't know what was going on. I pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned it off. Basically, right when my car stopped, I noticed a truck pulling over behind me. The road was mostly quiet, but this pickup truck, I guess, had been driving behind me. Maybe he saw the smoke and wanted to see if I was okay. So I was in my car with it stopped, and I immediately saw the driver's door to the truck behind me open, and then I saw a man get out and walk towards me. He was a bigger guy, who looked to be slightly older than I was. I opened up my door, got out, and said hi to him. He was very friendly right away, and said that he noticed my car smoking and asked me what happened. I said that I didn't know, and I wasn't much of a car person. I remember him saying that I couldn't drive it like that, and asked me where I was going. Then he offered to give me a ride to my parents' house. I accepted his offer. I know, that was stupid. I didn't know the guy at all, but he just seemed friendly to me, and I didn't think anything bad could happen. I was young and I made a bad choice. So anyways, I got into his truck on the passenger's side, and he got into the driver's seat. It was a pretty big truck. Right away, when I got in, he started talking to me and remained friendly. He asked me where I was coming from and then asked me about my job and stuff. As he was driving, I was basically just answering his questions and talking to him. Before I knew it, we were probably 10 minutes into the drive. I had told him my address where I live, and right away he said, "Oh, I know exactly where that is." But I remember that I noticed he didn't turn where he was supposed to. When I pointed that out, he said, "Oh, I just gotta stop somewhere quick. You don't mind, right?" I was just like, "Oh, okay." I should have said, "What do you mean you have to stop somewhere? It's after midnight and we were driving in the middle of nowhere. What could you possibly have to do?" That's where I got suspicious. In a kind of break in the conversation, I started to take out my phone. I knew my parents were probably asleep, but I wanted to try to call them and let them know what happened. I didn't work the next day, so we would be able to go down and get the car. But right when I took my phone out, the man driving said, "What are you doing there?" I started to say that I was going to text my mom, but he interrupted me. He asked me what kind of phone I had, and I said iPhone. He then said some nonsense like he was planning to buy one and asked me to show him the size. When I held it up to him, he instantly snatched it out of my hand. Then he opened up his window and tossed it out. I was shocked. I asked him what he was doing, but he didn't answer me. That's when everything changed, and I knew I was really in trouble. We drove in silence for the next few minutes. I was too scared to really say anything. I had no idea where we were even driving to anymore. We were just going down random country roads is what it looked like. After I'm not even sure how long, he finally drove down this really quiet road and then came to a stop on it. We were at the end of this really long driveway that looked like it was going into the woods. After stopping the truck, he told me to get out as he got out on his side. I got out of the truck and he was quickly around to my side. When he reached me, he grabbed my arm and started to lead me up the driveway. He was much bigger than I was, so I didn't think I would be able to fight him or anything. When we started to walk though, I turned and just kicked him in the groin as hard as I could. He let go of me and dropped to the ground. Then I took off running. I don't think that he was able to get up and chase after me right away. I had no clue as to where I was, but when I crossed the street, I ran into the woods. I knew that I had to take advantage of this, and I didn't stop running. When I made it through this woods, I found myself on another random quiet road. I started running alongside the road, but soon I actually saw headlights up ahead. There was a car driving. I went out into the middle of the road and started waving my arms like crazy. I didn't care who was driving the car. The odds are they weren't as crazy as the guy that I had just escaped from. But as the car approached, I then saw blue and red lights start to flash on it. This was a police car. I felt 10 times better instantly. They stopped, and I told the officer what happened. He called for backup, and when we went back to the guy in the truck's driveway, he was gone. The police drove me back home and asked me several more questions. Long story short, they later did find the guy who had picked me up. That was by far the scariest experience of my life. About 5 years ago, I was driving back home from work late one night. I worked at a restaurant/bar at the time and often worked very late. So it was past midnight when I was finally going home and driving my Honda Accord. I lived with my parents during this time in a neighborhood about 10 minutes from my job. So after leaving work, I got onto the roads, which were very quiet, as they often were in the late night hours. It was a huge difference from when I would go to work and there would be lots of cars on the road, to when I would drive home and there would be basically nobody. So within probably 2 or 3 minutes of driving home, I did notice a car behind me. When it started following me though, I had no idea. I kept driving home and was realizing that the car behind me was turning wherever I did. Soon, I was very suspicious that I was being followed. I was never quite 100% sure though. I thought maybe it was a neighbor or something. There are many other houses in the neighborhood. Still, I was suspicious by it. Soon, I had made it to the street where my parents' house was. I turned onto it, and the car behind me did the same. I actually thought about driving around the block or turning around, but ultimately, I drove to my house and pulled into the driveway. I remember being really nervous as I was pulling in that the car would as well, but it didn't. Instead, the car kept going down the street. I felt much better,
and then got out of my car and walked inside. By now, my parents and sister had long gone to bed upstairs. The lights were off inside the house, and it was very quiet. I went into the kitchen to make some ramen noodles or something like that. I was very hungry and wanted something quick to have before bed. As I was waiting for the water to heat up though, I casually walked around a little. I went into the living room and glanced out the front window. That's when I noticed a car driving extremely slow down the street, and I further noticed that it was the same car that had seemingly followed me all the way home. Now I was very suspicious. I continued to watch out the window. The car then turned and parked on the side of the street just past our house. I heard the engine turn off and then watched the driver's door open and saw a man get out. He then started walking towards our front yard. That's when I jumped back from the window so that he wouldn't see me. I went back into the kitchen and just hoped that this guy wasn't going to try to break in or something. Seconds later though, there was a knock at the front door. My heart started racing. What could this guy possibly want? Several moments went by and he knocked again. I slowly walked into the living room and went to a window. When I looked outside, I saw the man walking away from the front door, but he wasn't going back to his car. Instead, he walked around the side of our house. I went back into the kitchen and looked out of a back window. I was very careful when I was looking so that I wouldn't be seen. The man appeared to walk through the backyard. He made his way through the backyard and then went out of sight again. I then went back to the front of the house. When I looked out of the window, I didn't see the guy for a while. Soon though, I saw him going through the front yard. He went back to his car, then got inside. Then he drove away. After that, I went back to what I was doing. I looked out of the window a few more times that night, but he didn't come back. I still wonder who he was, why he followed me home, and what he was doing.
I used to work at a gas station. I only worked there for about a month, but still had a scary experience. When I worked there, it was mostly at night. One time I was working by myself, but it really wasn't that late yet. I think it was maybe about 10 o'clock at night. Customers were coming in here and there pretty steady up to that point, but at about 10 o'clock is when things really started to quiet down. So I was just standing there behind the counter, and the last customer left. For the next hour or so, things were very quiet. I think we got just 2 or 3 people inside, and just a few more get gas. Then the store was completely empty. Things became very quiet, and I became very bored. When this happened, I would usually just go on my phone. There was nothing that really needed to be done at that time. Maybe 10 minutes went by, but I suddenly heard a noise. It was coming from the back end of the store, a part that I couldn't see. Now the store wasn't that big and had maybe 5 aisles total, but there were areas out of my vision still. It was startling because I was 100% sure that nobody was in there. I got up from where I was to look, but I was really pretty nervous. Then I heard another noise. I asked if anybody was there, but I got no response. I started walking down one of the aisles towards where the noise was. I really wanted to just turn around and leave it alone though. Once I made it to where I had heard the noise, I still saw nothing. But just seconds later, as I was still kind of looking around, I heard another noise now in the next aisle over. I looked, and then saw a man appear from around the corner. I have no idea where he came from or where he had been. He had longer hair and a longer beard as well. The man walked right up to me and reached out his hand. I could tell he was holding something but didn't know what. I had no clue what he was doing until I felt a shock and fell to the ground. The man tased me. I was down, and he then stepped over me, and I saw him grab some random items off the shelf. He then yelled some random sentence that I didn't hear very well. I just remember hearing a couple of curse words. After that, he left. I was still on the ground for like a minute, and then finally got up. Then I called the police. I reported the guy, and the cops showed up a while later, but the man was long gone. We looked at security footage, and the guy literally hid around behind one of the aisles for over an hour. I have no idea what he was doing. I just know that after that, I quit.
This is the story of my freshman year in college. I went to a smaller university. There were only a few thousand students that attended it, so the campus wasn't very large. But I liked that about this place. However, my first year, I had to live in the dorms. To save a little bit of money and maybe make a friend, I chose to have a random roommate. This decision backfired. I didn't know anybody at the college when I got there, and the first person that I met was the roommate. He told me that his name was Joe. Joe was a strange guy. Overall, he was rude, unfriendly, and he never left the room other than to go to class. He was not at all the type of person that I would normally hang out with. And by the second week, I had given up all hope of being friends with him. I had a TV and a PS4 that I brought with to school, and Joe said that I could never use it because it bothered him. He also demanded that all lights be off after dark. I tried to reason with him once, but he threatened to report me to the dean of students. I wasn't scared by the threat. I didn't really think they would do anything, but I would rather just try to get along with my roommate. Instead, I would do my studying in class buildings around campus. I made other friends at college pretty quickly, and when I was talking with them about Joe one day, they suggested that I get a new room. I hadn't even realized this was an option until they told me, so I put in a request to get my own solo dorm room. I was told that when one came available, they would contact me. About 2 weeks later, so now about a month and a half into the school year, I was contacted. I was told that I could move into a different dorm building that was across the street. This building was a little bit newer and nicer. It had a room that was available, and I accepted it. I decided not to even tell Joe. I didn't know if he would be happy or sad about it, but I didn't want him thinking that I hated him or something. So one day, when Joe was gone at his classes, at a time that I didn't have class, I packed up all my stuff and just left. Without saying a word, my entire half of the room was now gone. I moved into my new building and got my new room. It was so nice to finally have a place all to myself. I could watch TV, play PlayStation, and not have any complaints. I could even have my friends over to hang out. However, I did want to be careful not to see my old roommate Joe. Like I said, it was a small campus, so there was a chance that we would cross paths. If we did, I didn't want him to ask me why I left or something. I was careful to avoid him, and I didn't see him at all for a couple of days. As for my new room, at first, it was great, but on probably the second or third night that I was there, something happened. I was playing video games late at night, and I heard somebody try to open my door. It was locked, so it didn't open. After a few seconds, I got up to look out of my peephole. When I was walking towards the door, I heard somebody knock on it. There weren't even that many people that knew I lived here yet, so I found this to be really strange. When I got to the door, I saw Joe standing there. I did not want to answer it, and I quietly moved away from the door. He knocked one more time, and I didn't answer that either. I was really creeped out. I mean, how did he even know that I lived here? I didn't tell him, and I wasn't friends with him on Snapchat or anything where he could see my location. This was really strange. I went back and looked like 10 minutes later, and he was finally gone. I didn't know why he had come here. There was no reason that I could think of. Well, the next morning, I got up and had to go to class. When I left my room, I walked down a couple of hallways to get to the front of the building. In one of the hallways was a sort of lounge study area. When I was approaching it, I saw Joe sitting in one of the chairs there. I couldn't believe that he was in my dorm building. He didn't live here. I didn't know what he was doing. I turned around and left out of another exit. I thought maybe he was following me. It was really strange. Later on in that same day, I was walking on campus and I happened to notice him again. There was sort of a lot of other people walking around, and I saw him a ways behind me. I walked back to my dorm building, and he seemed to almost follow me there. He wasn't walking close enough to follow me inside or anything, but I was very suspicious when I noticed. I got back in my building and was wondering what this guy's problem was. Well, that same night, he was back at my room. Once more, I was up late, and he tried entering. It was locked like always, and he then knocked on the door. This time, it was louder than before. I didn't answer, but was watching him through the peephole. He knocked again very loudly, but I still did nothing. When he knocked for a third time, I remember somebody else who lived down the hall opened up their door. They told him to quiet down. Joe didn't say anything. Then he stood there for probably a minute. After that, he backed up a step and then kicked my door extremely loud and hard. I was honestly afraid that the door might break, but it didn't. Joe then turned and stormed off. After this, I made up my mind that I was going to report him, and the next day I did. Somebody must have talked to him or something, because I stopped seeing him after that, and he did not return to my room. I was still very suspicious that he would follow me around or show up again or something for like a month, but luckily he didn't. A while after this, I met somebody that used to know him. They weren't really his friend, but had several classes with him. They told me that he had dropped out, and also said that his name wasn't even Joe. None of these things really surprised me. I'm not sure why he gave me a fake name, but he was a weird guy. Looking back, I'm really glad that I moved out when I did.
I currently live in an apartment, and this is an event that took place maybe a month ago. There was a big thunderstorm going on. I was inside my place and hearing the rain and thunder and occasionally seeing the lightning. I didn't mind thunderstorms, and I found them to be pretty relaxing. It's funny because as a kid I was scared of them, but not anymore. So during this storm, I was in my living room watching a show on my TV. Out of nowhere, at almost 10 o'clock, there was a really loud knock at my front door. This seemed kind of strange because of how late it was. I had no idea as to who it would be. I wasn't really that close with any of my neighbors that they would knock on my door, and with it being this hour, it was especially strange. I decided to just ignore it, but then there was another knock. I almost didn't get up at all, but I was curious, so I decided to go and see who was there, but I was still pretty sure that I didn't want to answer it. I went over to the door and then looked out of my peephole. I saw that there was a man standing there who I didn't know. He was wearing all black and looking right at my door. He had long hair that was wet, as if he had been out in the rain maybe. The guy looked really creepy, so I quickly moved away from the door and hoped that he would leave. After about a minute though, he knocked again. I still was not going to answer it. I stayed in the living room on my couch. He didn't knock again after that though. So I stayed out in the living room watching TV for maybe another hour. Then I went into my bedroom to go to sleep. When I got into my room, I remember looking out of the window at the rain. My apartment was on the second floor and looked out to the parking lot of the complex. When I did, I noticed that the same man who had knocked on my door was standing out there. He was in the middle of the parking lot in the pouring rain and staring right at me. He wasn't moving or walking around. He was just standing there. It really gave me the creeps. I then closed my window shades and tried my best to fall asleep. Eventually, I was able to. Since then, I haven't seen the guy. I still don't know who he is, why he knocked on my door, or why he was staring at my window. I'm hoping that I never see him again.
This story happened back when I was 16 years old. I had recently got my first job, which was working at a restaurant. I remember that during this time, my parents let me use their old car that was barely running. It broke down on me once, but we were able to get it running again. For a few weeks, the car was actually pretty reliable. I drove it to and from school and work as well. One night, I worked sort of late. After getting off, I started driving home. It usually took about 15 minutes, and we lived a little ways away in a more rural area. So as I was driving, the roads were quiet, and there was mostly just woods on both sides. The car just started losing power out of nowhere and basically dying. I didn't know what to do, and eventually it slowed down and it wouldn't go anymore. I got off to the side of the road and tried to start the car, but nothing happened at all. It was the same thing as before when it had broken down. I really wasn't sure how to get it moving again. I took out my phone to call my parents, but when I did, I realized that my phone was dead, and I couldn't charge it because my car had no power. I really didn't know what to do. I wasn't near any businesses or anything. There were a few private properties around, but I didn't know if it would be a good idea to go to someone's house at this hour. I hoped that maybe my parents would realize that I hadn't returned after a while and go out looking for me.
They knew that the car had a tendency to break down and that this was a possibility. But in the meantime, I didn't know what to do. I just sat there and looked around. Nobody was driving by or anything like that. Before long, it started to feel kind of spooky out there. There was a dense woods to both my left and right. I heard crickets in the background and sometimes an owl or trees blowing in the wind. But other than that, things were very quiet. I really did not want to get out of my car. I remember that probably 10 minutes into sitting there, I was casually looking around. When I did, I looked to my right in the woods, and I saw a man standing half behind a tree. It was a guy with a beard, and that's all that I noticed. He was just standing there, sort of behind some trees, and watching me. I was so creeped out when I saw it, and my heart started racing like crazy. I felt helpless. What could I do? And why on earth was there a man in the woods over there? He just kept standing there, watching me. After more than a minute of this, suddenly the man disappeared back into the woods. I was still really scared. I felt maybe slightly better that he was gone, but not a whole lot. Probably 10 minutes at least went by with me just sitting there. I was constantly looking around, wondering if the man would return. Just when I was starting to feel slightly better, I looked to my right and saw the guy again. He emerged from the woods, and this time I saw him slowly walking towards me. I watched him go all the way to the edge of the ditch on the side of the road. Now he was less than 10 feet away from me. The bearded man then walked to my passenger side door and tried opening it. Then he calmly walked around to my driver's door and tried opening that. I was so scared that I just ducked and covered. I buried my face in my hands and tried not to look. I heard him poking around my car for a little while. He tried just about every single door, and then he knocked on one of the windows. Then he came to my driver's window and started banging on it. The entire time, he didn't say a word. I looked and saw his creepy face looking right at me. It was probably the most scared I've ever been. I truly didn't know what was going to happen. At least my car was locked, but I couldn't drive it, and he might be able to break in. After banging on my driver's window for a while, the man stopped and then started going to the other side of my car again. When he made it around, that's when I saw headlights in the distance behind me. This made me feel slightly better. As they approached though, I heard the sound of a car honking over and over again. At first, I was confused. Why was this car driving towards me honking? But as it got closer, I recognized it to be my parents. The man then ran off, away from my car and back into the woods. My parents' SUV pulled over to the side of the road behind my car, and I got out and ran over to them. I got inside, and they asked me what was going on. I told them how my car broke down, my phone was dead, and this guy just came out of the woods. We were all safely inside my parents' car now, and they called the police and reported the guy. He did not come back out of the woods, and we stayed there until the police arrived. When they got there, we spoke with the officers, and also arranged for a tow truck to come and get my car. Meanwhile, they searched the woods, but were unable to locate the man. It really creeps me out knowing that he got away. I mean, I don't know where he came from, or what he was even doing. It still creeps me out to think back to it. I'm just glad that I'm okay. This is something that happened back when I used to work at a Chick-fil-A. I would say it was about 5 years ago now. I worked there for only a few months. The job was pretty good, and my coworkers were very nice. One time, I was working a closing shift. I remember that with a few hours left, things had finally started to quiet down. I went out and was told to sweep around the restaurant. I would help to clean tables around the dining room as well. We were constantly making sure that the restaurant was in good order for the customers. So I went around and only a few people were scattered around the restaurant here and there eating. Maybe a total of like 4 people were sitting down. I remember going towards the very back corner, and there was this man sitting in a booth. He looked kind of mysterious because his head was down, but he wasn't sleeping.
He was also wearing all black and had a hood covering most of his face. I didn't really think too much about it though. After sweeping the floors, I went to go do something else. Sometime later, I went back to clean some of the tables, so I was in that same general area. I noticed that every single person was gone now, except for the man. He was still in the same place. So I cleaned and then went back. The next time that I returned to the dining room area was when we closed at 10 p.m. I went out into that area and noticed that the man was still there. He would have to leave now. I walked up to him and told him that we were closing. The man did not respond to me or even acknowledge me. I spoke louder and once again said that we were closed and added that he would have to leave now. After a few seconds of silence, I was getting nervous. Then the man turned and said no to me very loudly. I didn't know what to do. I just said, "But we're closed." The man then stood up and just looked at me. He was a large man and much taller than I was. I just walked back over to the counter to tell a coworker. I found my coworker Brian and let him know about the situation. Then we both walked back over to the man. He was sitting down at the table again the same way that he had been for hours. After approaching, we both told him once more that he had to leave. The man ignored us at first. Brian then threatened to call the police on him. The man then stood up and looked right at Brian. Then he loudly said, "Go ahead, skinny boy." I specifically remember him calling Brian a skinny boy. Brian asked the guy what his problem was. The man's response was to walk over and take the little flower decoration that we had at the table. We had flowers in small vases at many of the tables or booths. After picking it up, the man then slammed the vase down on the floor, breaking it. Brian told me to follow him, and we both quickly went to the other side of the restaurant. We knew at this point that the man was dangerous. I remember the guy yelled something at us as we were moving away. We found the two other coworkers that were in the back and told them what was happening. We all then decided to leave the restaurant for our own safety. Then we called the police. We went to our vehicles and waited, and the man remained inside of the restaurant. The police got there very quickly and went inside. We couldn't tell what was going on, but about 20 minutes later, they came out of the restaurant with the man. Apparently, he did not respond to officers' orders. He tried tackling a police officer after he was approached, and it took 3 officers to bring him down. Eventually, though, he was apprehended and taken away. We went back inside and finished up our closing duties. The restaurant was not really damaged or anything from the man's rampage, just a few things scattered around. That certainly made for my scariest experience working at Chick-fil-A, though. This happened 5 years ago, but I will never forget it. It all happened one seemingly normal Thursday night. I was doing some late-night shopping at the supermarket. With it being a little bit later, it wasn't nearly as busy. There were a few people here and there also shopping, but I was able to get what I needed pretty quickly. In the process of doing this, though, there was one shopper who I kept noticing. It was this woman, and she had blonde hair, sort of messy, and it seemed like she was watching me, because I noticed her once, and then noticed her again at the other end of the store. I thought that it was a coincidence until I saw her another time, and that time, she was just walking behind me. She didn't have a cart or anything, and didn't really seem to be shopping. I never saw her looking at any items on the shelves. It just seemed weird to me. I saw her several more times as I shopped, but overall, I just ignored her. Eventually, I was done shopping, and I went to check out. I didn't see her anymore then. After I paid for everything, I walked out to my car and still didn't notice the woman. I figured that she must have stopped following me at some point. I didn't know why she had been seemingly following me, but I really didn't care anymore. So I left the store and I went back home. I lived alone in a smaller house at this time, and it was maybe 10 minutes away. So I got back and then brought everything inside my house. When I was putting the groceries away, I saw this car going down my street. It then pulled onto the side of the road and stopped right in front of my house. The car's headlights turned off, and then I heard the engine turn off as well. I didn't know who was driving, and this had never really happened before.
I walked over to the front window in the living room and looked out to sea. Obviously, it was too dark to tell who was driving. I watched the car for a while, and nobody got out. It was suspicious, but eventually, I ignored it and moved on. I was tired and had to be going to bed soon, so I remember that I got ready for bed and then looked out the window once more. The car was still there. I hadn't noticed anybody getting out of it though. I figured though that most likely somebody had gotten out, I just didn't notice. They probably went to one of the neighbors' houses. Why they parked in front of my house, I didn't know, but whatever. So I went to bed. After falling asleep, I woke up sometime in the night. I remember a very short time after waking, I heard a noise from my window. I looked over and saw a woman staring at me directly on the other side. It was the same woman I had seen at the grocery store. I was really confused. I got up and turned on all the lights. She moved away from the window, and then I went into the living room. When I got there, I saw the woman running through my front yard. She then got inside of the car that was still parked on the side of the road in front of my house. Then she drove away. So it was her who was driving the car. I really didn't know what to do. I called the police and reported the incident, but the woman was long gone. I didn't know her license plate or anything. The only thing that I could do was tell them what happened and give them a basic description of her. But luckily after that, I never saw her again. This happened last spring. I was shopping at Walmart one night. I only went there to get a couple of things in the home improvement section. The store was pretty quiet overall, but things were especially quiet in this area. I remember that as I was looking at a couple of products on the shelves, I heard somebody walking nearby. I looked up and saw a man entering the aisle that I was in. At first, I thought nothing of it, but he soon approached. Then he said hi to me and asked me if I could help him out for a second. When I asked what it was, he asked me if I knew much about cars, because he didn't. I told him that I knew a little bit and asked what he needed help with. The man just said that he had a quick question about a product. I said okay, and then followed him a few aisles over to the automotive section. There were a few aisles that had car parts and products in them. He walked up to like a car wash and wax kit and asked me what it was. I told him what it was, and I was confused why he would ask me that because it literally said on it. Then he got a tire inflator and asked me what that was. I explained to him what that product was as well. The man then asked me about probably 5 more things. I was wondering what he was doing. It seemed like he just wanted to ask me what every single product in the aisle was. After like 5 minutes, I told the guy that I had to be going now, and I started to walk away. He literally stopped me and picked up a random object off the shelf and asked me what that one was too. I stopped mid-stride, turned to him and said, "That's a Mobil 1 oil filter." Then I continued with my walk away from the guy. I got back to the aisle where I had been before, and now quickly grabbed the products that I had been meaning to get and started walking away. I just knew that the guy was going to try to follow me, so I started walking quickly towards the front of the store to check out. I made it to the front without seeing him, but when I was at the self-checkout scanning my items, I saw him again. He was standing a ways away, just watching me. I didn't know what this guy's deal was, but it was kind of creepy. After paying, I took my stuff and started walking for the exit. When I left the store and was about 20 feet outside, I heard someone walking behind me. I turned around and saw that it was the same guy. I was annoyed, and I stopped to confront him. I said, "Why are you following me around, man?" He didn't answer me, and just walked directly to his left and started walking along the side of the store. He just completely ignored what I had to say, but at least he seemed to be going in another direction now, and I could leave. So I turned and continued heading for my car. I had parked kind of towards the back, near a few other cars. When I got inside, I started my engine, but then saw somebody standing behind me. It was the same guy. Now, I had a car parked in front of me, a cart corral to my left, and another car to my right, so I was boxed in. I needed him to move. He got closer and started sort of looking in my rear window. It was very strange. I rolled down my window and asked him to move. The guy didn't answer me, and then got on top of the rear portion of my car.
He was then standing on top of my car. I told him to get down, but he didn't. He just kept standing there. I really didn't know what to do. This went on for like 2 or 3 minutes. Then he jumped down and sprinted away. I left right then and there. After that, I did not return to that Walmart for a while. That guy still creeps me out when I think about it.